My world shattered with a whisper, not a roar. I was sitting across from a woman named Natalie, whose perfectly coiffed blonde hair seemed to mock the disarray of my life. She didn't even bother to look up from her sleek, silver tablet as she delivered the news. Due to a necessary restructuring, your position, Mr. Trent Graham, is being eliminated. 19 years. 19 years I'd dedicated to Australis Engineering, a company that once built the backbone of this nation's infrastructure, now reduced to a sterile conference room in Melbourne, with a hulking security guard named Bruiser waiting just outside the door. My name is Trent Graham, a 62-year-old senior financial controller. For nearly 2 decades, I meticulously balanced every ledger, ensuring every single cent was accounted for. We'll be needing your access card and parking permit, Brendan, Natalie's smirking associate, added, sliding a flimsy cardboard box across the polished mahogany table. Bruiser will escort you to collect your personal items. I simply nodded, a single, sharp dip of my head. There was no argument, no plea, just a quiet resignation as I watched Natalie's perfectly manicured fingers tap an impatient rhythm on the glass tabletop. Is there anything you'd like to say, Trent? Her tone was a thinly veiled challenge, expecting tears, perhaps, or a furious outburst, anything to alleviate the corporate guilt of what they were doing. No, thank you for the opportunity, I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil churning within me. I stood, adjusted the knot of my tie, and tucked my worn leather briefcase under my arm. It was the same one my wife, Diane, had given me 15 years ago, before the insidious grip of cancer stole her from me, before I buried myself in spreadsheets and quarterly reports, seeking solace from the deafening silence of our empty home in Perth. Human Resources will be in touch regarding your superannuation package, Brendan stated, his emphasis on superannuation, the Australian equivalent of a retirement fund, feeling pointed, deliberate. We both knew I was 3 years shy of full benefits. Bruiser, despite his imposing stature, looked genuinely embarrassed as he lumbered after me to my office. Sorry about this, Mr. Graham, he mumbled, his voice a low rumble, as I carefully wrapped a framed photograph of Diane in a sheet of tissue paper. Not your doing. Bruiser, I assured him, offering a small, tight smile. I placed my access card on the desk, but kept the leather briefcase closed. Inside, tucked away in a hidden compartment, was a flash drive. On it, 3 years of meticulous documentation, every irregular vendor payment, every suspicious wire transfer, every suddenly canceled audit. Natalie and Brendan, with their sleek suits and predatory smiles, thought they were simply cleaning house, ridding themselves of the old-school accountant who dared to ask too many questions about the burgeoning consulting fees appearing in departmental budgets. What they didn't know was that I'd been recording everything since the day Natalie conveniently lost those critical vendor verification forms, since Brendan began systematically pushing out anyone who dared to question the new executive expense policy. I walked through the lobby, past co-workers who suddenly found their shoes utterly fascinating. 19 years of unwavering loyalty, reduced to a cardboard box and averted gazes. It wasn't until I reached my car, parked under the harsh glare of the Australian sun, that I allowed myself one small, tight smile. They thought I was leaving with nothing. I was leaving with everything they desperately wished remained hidden. I hadn't always been suspicious by nature. The first 16 years at Australis Engineering had been good ones. I joined when the company was still family-owned, run by old Harold Drummond himself, a man who inspected production quality every single morning, even before he'd had his first cup of coffee. Numbers don't lie, Trent, he used to tell me, his voice gravelly with age and wisdom. People do. Your job is to make sure our numbers tell the truth. After Harold retired, his son, Lachlan, sold to investors. Things changed, slowly at first. Small corners cut, cheaper materials sourced, longer intervals between equipment maintenance. Nothing dramatic enough to immediately raise alarms. Then came the rebranding, a new logo, new leadership, a new vision. Natalie arrived from a multinational firm with a reputation for aggressive growth. Brendan followed 6 months later, spouting corporate jargon about culture evolution. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, holding on to Harold's faith in the numbers, until the first quarterly review under the new management. These vendor payments don't match our received inventory, I'd pointed out, my finger tapping a line on the spreadsheet. Natalie had smiled, all teeth and no warmth. We're transitioning suppliers. Trent, it'll balance out. It never did. My follow-up emails went unanswered, then simply disappeared into the digital ether. Then came the executive retreats to lavish resorts in Queensland. The consulting fees paid to shell companies I couldn't find registration records for. The expense reports with duplicated charges that somehow always received swift approval. That's when I started keeping notes, meticulously creating a second set of books, the real ones, and backing everything up off-site. Not because I planned to do anything with it, not initially. It was just Harold's voice, echoing in my head, numbers don't lie. Meanwhile, the workplace itself transformed. Younger employees, with clear connections to Natalie or Brendan, were rapidly promoted. Veteran staff, the backbone of Australis Engineering, found themselves reassigned to dead-end roles or subtly pushed towards early retirement. Gary from purchasing, a good man with an honest face, stopped by my office after he'd found some glaring invoice discrepancies. Something's not right. Trent, he'd whispered, his voice laced with unease. 2 weeks later, Gary was gone. Performance issues, according to the terse internal announcement. My daughter, Jody, a brilliant young solicitor who had recently made partner at her Sydney law firm, noticed the change in me. You're working late every night. Dad, what's going on? I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Jody had her own demanding career, her own battles to fight. She didn't need my problems. Just busy season, I'd lied. My voice a little too quick, a little too casual. But last month, when Brendan reorganized the finance department, strategically placing his completely inexperienced nephew, Tyson, directly between me and all executive financial approvals, I knew my time was running short. So I made copies, secured every shred of evidence, created a meticulous timeline of every questionable transaction, every policy change that systematically removed financial safeguards. Not because I craved revenge, because someone needed to remember what Harold had taught us. Numbers don't lie. The full weight of my situation truly hit me as I pulled into my driveway that afternoon, the familiar terraced house in Brunswick seeming both a sanctuary and a prison. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I had nowhere to be tomorrow morning. No reports to review, no month-end close to prepare for. I sat in my car for a long time, just staring at my front door. My house felt different, emptier somehow, though nothing had physically changed. I placed the cardboard box on the kitchen counter and poured myself 2 fingers of the single malt whiskey I kept for special occasions. This, I suppose, qualified, though not in the way I'd ever imagined my career ending. The phone rang, startling me. It was Jody. Dad, Tina from accounts just called me. She said you were let go. What happened? I gave her the sanitized version. Restructuring. Position eliminated. The usual corporate jargon. That's bold, Dad, my daughter retorted, her lawyer instincts flaring. They can't just do that after 19 years, without cause. We should file. No, I cut her off gently. No lawsuits. But Dad, she protested, clearly agitated. Trust me on this, Jody. I took a slow sip of whiskey. Some battles aren't fought in courtrooms. After we hung up, I went to my home office and powered up the old desktop computer. The flash drive from my briefcase contained everything, meticulously organized by date, incident type, and dollar amount. 3 years of financial manipulation, neatly cataloged with supporting evidence. I opened a new document and began typing. Not an angry letter, not a threat, just a clear, factual summary of what I'd observed, times, dates, amounts. The email addresses for the Australian Securities and Investments Commission (ASIC) and the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions (CDPP) waited patiently in the recipient field. My finger hovered over the send button. Was I really going to do this? These weren't just spreadsheet errors or honest mistakes. This was deliberate financial misconduct. People would lose jobs, maybe face charges. The company Harold Drummond had built, the very foundation of Australis Engineering, could collapse. I closed the computer without sending anything. Instead, I found myself pulling out a dusty photo album, pictures of Harold's retirement party, the old team, faces smiling long before the rot set in. My late wife, Diane, standing beside me at a company picnic, both of us younger, oblivious to the insidious cancer already growing inside her. "What would you do, Diane?" I whispered to her photograph, my voice thick with emotion. I already knew the answer. Diane never tolerated dishonesty. "Do what's right, Trent," she would have said, her voice gentle yet firm. "Everything else is just noise." I slept poorly that night, haunted by the images of those files, the faces of my former colleagues, and the ghost of Harold Drummond. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The fog of shock had cleared, replaced by a cold, unwavering clarity. This wasn't about my job anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was about Harold's legacy, about the smaller businesses being cheated, about the employees who would eventually pay the price for executive greed. I made coffee, straightened my tie out of 19 years of ingrained habit, and picked up the phone. "James," I began, my voice steady, resolute. "It's Trent Graham. I need to talk to you about some financial irregularities at Australis Engineering." "Yes, it's extensive. Can we meet today?" James Patterson had been my roommate in college. Now, he was a federal prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. The first move had been made. 3 days after meeting with James, a certified letter arrived from Australis Engineering's legal department. The severance package they had so generously prepared required my signature on a confidentiality agreement that would prevent me from discussing any aspect of company operations past, present, or future. The dollar amount was insultingly low, 4 months' salary for 19 years of service. I called Jody for legal advice. "They're worried about something?" "Dad," she said, her voice sharp with professional insight, after reviewing the document, "this goes way beyond standard non-disclosure terms. What happens if I don't sign? They're threatening to contest your unemployment benefits and withhold payment for unused annual leave," she explained. Her voice hardened. "Legally shaky, but they're betting you won't have the resources to fight it." I thanked her and promised to think it over. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already decided. Later that afternoon, my doorbell chimed. Natalie stood on my porch, a smile plastered on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Trent," she purred, as if we were old friends, casual acquaintances meeting for a coffee. "May I come in? I wanted to personally check how you're doing." I let her into my living room but didn't offer refreshments. "The severance paperwork," she said, placing a fresh copy on my coffee table. "There was a misunderstanding. We can offer an additional 2 months if you sign today." "What's the rush?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, my expression unreadable. Her smile tightened. "Just a fraction. The board is finalizing next quarter's budget. We need to close out all pending financial obligations, like properly paying vendors." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Something flickered in her eyes, a fleeting shadow of surprise. "I'm not sure what you mean," she replied smoothly, her composure quickly returning. "The Windsor invoices," I said carefully, my gaze unwavering. "The ones that showed up in the system without inventory receipts." "Clerical errors," she replied, her voice still smooth, too smooth. "Already addressed. And the consulting payments to Evergreen Partners, the company that shares an address with your brother-in-law's home office in Brisbane." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Natalie's smile vanished completely, replaced by a mask of cold fury. "I'd be careful with accusations, Trent," she warned, her voice stripped of all pretense of warmth. "Especially unfounded ones that could be construed as defamatory. Did you remove any company documents when you left? Because that would constitute theft." I kept copies of my work product, As permitted in the employee handbook, I replied truthfully, my voice still calm, though my heart hammered against my ribs. She stood abruptly, her movement sharp, decisive. I'll give you until tomorrow to reconsider the severance offer. After that, things might become complicated for your superannuation planning. After she left, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Back off if you know what's good for you. We know about the flash drive. That evening, I noticed a dark sedan parked across from my house. It was still there the next morning. By afternoon, my bank called. Someone had attempted to access my accounts using my tax file number, but incorrect passwords. When I checked my email, dozens of subscription confirmations flooded my inbox services I'd never signed up for, all requiring immediate payment. It was clear they were sending a message. They could make my life difficult. They could destroy my credit. They could watch my house. I called James again. They're pushing back, I told him, hard. Expected, he replied calmly, but concerning. It suggests there's more than just sloppy bookkeeping. Forward me everything. The severance offer, the text, the unauthorized access attempts. Document the surveillance. What about my evidence? I asked, my voice betraying a hint of desperation. Is it enough? His pause told me everything. It's compelling, Trent, but corporations like Australis Engineering have battalions of lawyers who will claim these are isolated incidents or accounting errors. We need more. Someone on the inside. I hung up feeling more alone than ever. They were watching me, pressuring me, and I didn't have enough ammunition to fight back. Not yet, anyway. A week after Natalie's visit, I received a call from my old assistant, Brenda. Her voice was hushed, nervous. Can we meet somewhere? Not in public. Not at your house. We arranged to meet at my brother's cabin, an hour outside of Perth. He was in Queensland for the winter. The place would be empty. Brenda arrived looking exhausted, constantly checking her rear-view mirror as she pulled into the driveway. They're doing a full audit, she said, without preamble, once we were inside. But it's not a real audit. They're changing records, Trent, backdating approvals, creating paper trails that never existed. How do you know this? I asked, my voice low. They brought in consultants from Brendan's old firm. They don't know I can access the system logs. They still have me using your old credentials. She pulled out a flash drive. I've been documenting everything. The before and after. I stared at the tiny device. You're risking your job. They're already planning to eliminate my position next month. Her laugh was bitter. Hello. Found that out when they accidentally copied me on the restructuring email. What Brenda showed me went far beyond what I'd suspected. This wasn't just creative accounting or inflated executive perks. Australis Engineering had been systematically overcharging government contracts, falsifying certification documents for parts that didn't meet safety standards, and recording phantom inventory to inflate company valuation. There's more, Brenda said, pulling up an email chain on her laptop. They're preparing to sell the manufacturing division to a private equity group. The employees won't know until it's done. The superannuation fund, my worst fears were confirmed by her grave expression. They've been borrowing from it for over a year. If the sale goes through, there won't be enough to cover obligations. Hundreds of families' retirement plans built over decades, all at risk. Who else knows about this? I asked, my mind reeling. Just the executive team, and now you. She hesitated. And someone else, I think. George from Quality Control started asking questions last month. He disappeared a week before you did. Fired, I prompted. That's the thing. There's no termination paperwork. His employee file shows he resigned, but his badge was never turned in, and his desk was cleared out overnight. A cold, heavy feeling settled in my stomach. Have you heard from him? No. His phone goes straight to voicemail. On the drive home, I couldn't shake the sense that we were dealing with something far darker than mere financial fraud. The surveillance car was gone from my street when I returned, but somehow that didn't reassure me. I called George's number, straight to voicemail, just as Brenda had said. I left a vague message about connecting about professional opportunities. Then I called James again. "We need to move faster," I told him, explaining what Brenda had shared. "This changes things," he agreed. "The superannuation fund angle elevates this significantly. I'll speak with my superiors tomorrow." "But Trent," he paused, his voice serious, "be careful. If they're manipulating records on this scale, they're desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices." That night, sleep was a distant luxury. I kept thinking about George, about Harold Drummond, who'd trusted me to keep his company's finances honest, about the machine operators and warehouse staff who'd put in decades of service, counting on pensions that were being systematically drained away. At 2 a.m., my security system alerted me to movement in my backyard. By the time I reached the window, whoever it was had vanished. But my home office window was cracked open, just slightly, but enough to notice they weren't just watching anymore. They were sending another message. Nowhere was safe. I didn't wait for them to make another move. By dawn, I was executing a plan I'd been formulating since Brenda's revelations. First, I moved all my evidence, both my documentation and Brenda's, to 3 separate, secure locations. One set went to Jody, with instructions to open only if something happened to me. Another went into a safety deposit box at a bank where Natalie's financial tentacles couldn't reach. The third I encrypted and sent to James, with a detailed key delivered separately. Next, I reached out to Gary from purchasing, who'd been pushed out months before me. We met at a diner 2 towns over. "I've been waiting for this call," he said grimly, after I explained the situation. I found the same discrepancies, started asking questions. Next thing I know, I'm being escorted out for violating company policy. "Did they threaten you after?" I asked. "Not directly, but my home was broken into a week later. Nothing valuable taken, just my laptop and some files." He leaned forward, his eyes earnest. "I filed a police report, documented everything. Never thought it would be useful, but it establishes a pattern." "You would be willing to make a statement," I finished. He nodded without hesitation. "Been feeling like a coward for staying quiet this long." By afternoon, I'd connected with 2 more former employees with similar stories. Each had pieces of the puzzle, departments where numbers didn't add up, projects that disappeared from tracking systems, safety concerns that were buried. James called with news. The federal prosecutor's office was officially interested, but they needed more, particularly about the superannuation fund manipulation. "We need current financial records," he said. "Without them, Australis Engineering's lawyers will claim the issues were fixed after you left." Brenda was taking an enormous risk just talking to me. Asking her to extract more documents might put her in real danger. That's when my phone rang. An unknown number. "Trent?" The voice was barely recognizable. "George." I stepped outside the coffee shop where I'd been working, looking around instinctively. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Listen carefully. His words were rushed, frightened. "The Wollongong contract. Check the testing certification documents against the actual test results. They're putting defective parts in military vehicles." "George, where are you?" I pressed. "They threatened my family. Said they'd make sure my kids—" His voice broke, dissolving into a choked sob. "I'm leaving town, Trent. But someone needs to stop them before someone gets killed." The line went dead. Military contracts. Defective parts. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about lives. I called James immediately, relaying George's chilling information. His response was immediate. "This changes everything. I'm bringing in the Department of Defense. Can you come to my office now?" 3 hours later, I sat in a conference room with James and 2 stern-faced Department of Defense DOD investigators, their uniforms crisp and their expressions grim. I laid out everything: the financial fraud, the document manipulation, the superannuation fund depletion, and now the military contract corruption. "We'll need your full cooperation. Mr. Graham," one investigator said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "This investigation will become very visible very quickly. We understand your safety might be compromised. We can arrange protection." I shook my head. "I have a better idea." The next morning, I called Natalie directly. "I've been thinking about that severance package," I said, keeping my voice submissive, defeated. "I'd like to discuss terms." "Wise decision, Trent," she replied, poorly concealing her satisfaction. "Come to the office tomorrow, 900 hours. We'll finalize everything." "Actually," I countered, "I'd prefer somewhere more neutral. The Lakeside Hotel. They have private meeting rooms." She hesitated, then, sensing my apparent capitulation, agreed. What she didn't know was that the Lakeside Hotel was already crawling with federal agents, rooms wired for recording, and every entrance under surveillance. The trap was set, and Natalie was walking right into it. The Lakeside Hotel's Magnolia room felt unnaturally quiet as Natalie reviewed the paperwork I'd brought her. Her attorney sat beside her, a portly man with a nervous twitch, occasionally whispering in her ear. "This all looks in order," she finally said, sliding the non-disclosure agreement across the polished table. "Just sign here, and we can put this unfortunate situation behind us." I looked at the document, 12 pages of dense legal language designed to silence me forever. Beside it sat the severance check, 5 months' salary for 19 years of my life. "Before I sign," I said carefully, my voice calm, "I'd like to clarify something. This agreement covers all company matters, correct? Including the Superannuation Fund irregularities and the Wollongong military contract?" The attorney stiffened, his eyes darting to Natalie. Natalie's smile faltered for just a moment, a tiny crack in her polished facade. "All company matters," she confirmed smoothly, her voice betraying nothing. "Standard language." I nodded, reached for a pen, then paused. "One more question. Does this cover my obligation to report federal crimes I've witnessed?" "What are you implying?" The attorney leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "I'm not implying anything," I said, and stood slowly. "I'm stating that I've already provided evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and criminal endangerment to federal authorities, including our conversation right now." On cue, the conference room door opened. James walked in, flanked by 2 grim-faced FBI agents and the Dodd investigators. "Natalie Stokes," one agent said, his voice firm and authoritative. "We have a warrant to search all Australis Engineering facilities and seize financial records related to government contracts." Her face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of white. As James placed a thick folder on the table, he said quietly, "This is just a fraction of what we have. The rest is being presented to a grand jury as we speak." Natalie lunged for her phone, but an agent gently intercepted her, taking it from her grasp. "Brendan Ellis and the CEO are being detained for questioning simultaneously," James explained, his gaze steady, "along with several board members." I didn't stay to watch them lead Natalie away. My part was done. 6 months after the arrest at the Lakeside Hotel, I stood in the old Australis Engineering manufacturing facility, watching workers on the assembly line. The machines hummed with the same rhythmic efficiency they had for decades, but everything else had changed. The company had been placed in receivership during the investigation. When the dust finally settled, a coalition of dedicated employees, with help from a state economic development fund, had managed to purchase the manufacturing division. They'd renamed it Australis Legacy Manufacturing. They'd asked me to help set up the new financial systems, proper ones, with transparency and accountability built into every level. All done for the day. "Mr. Graham?" Bruiser, the security guard who'd once escorted me out, now nodded respectfully as I signed out at the front desk. "Just about," I replied, handing him back my visitor badge. Outside, Jody waited in her car. "How's it looking in there?" she asked as I settled into the passenger seat. "Good. They've got a solid team. They'll be fine without me checking over their shoulders." I glanced back at the building, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over me. Harold would be proud. We drove in comfortable silence for a while. The news had covered the story extensively. Executives arrested, charges filed, plea deals negotiated. The superannuation funds had been partially recovered, not everything, but enough that most retirees wouldn't lose their homes. Natalie and Brendan were awaiting trial. The CEO had turned state's evidence, a desperate bid for a lighter sentence. The story had faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals, but the impact remained. "Any regrets?" Jody asked, breaking the silence as we pulled up to my house. I thought about the question carefully, letting the vastness of the journey settle within me. "No," I finally answered, my voice firm. "I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because it was right." That evening, I packed away my files on Australis Engineering. The whole story was documented, preserved, but I no longer needed to carry it with me. Tomorrow, I was starting as a part-time financial ethics consultant for a manufacturing association, helping other companies set up systems that made it harder for the Natalies and Brendans of the world to manipulate the books. Not a bad final chapter for a 62-year-old accountant who just wanted the numbers to tell the truth.